and welcome to yet another iteration of the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond's Enterprise Circle. I'd like to begin by thanking our steering committee for the Enterprise Circle: Andy Brownstein, Dean Devansky, Elliot Fitzgerald, Leonard Goldberg, Francis Goldman, Seth Kaplan, Neil Kessler, Rick Looney, Steve Myers, Adam Nelson, John J. Schwartz, Stuart Simon, Phyllis Rubenstein, and Dan Siegel. Thanks as always for your excellent work and your help. The Enterprise Circle, as many of you know, geez, it's hard to imagine you don't know, because here you are. But as many of you know, it's a business affinity group and a networking group that our good friend Steve Myers, we were just talking last week, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. Steve Myers conceived of some years ago to get folks in the community an opportunity to visit with one another and to learn a little bit about our community's history and business work here in Richmond and around the country, really. And it's been a happy occasion for some collegiality and some visiting and for some learning for, geez, I want to say the better portion of a decade. This is not, by design, a fundraising event, although there are people here who will happily take your check. I'm looking at you, Sam Asher. There are folks here who are happy to do that, but I do have the happy opportunity to share with you that the Federation's annual campaign is underway, and we are making excellent progress even this early in the process. I'm happy to report, thanks to all of you, that the campaign so far has raised $1,663,897 towards its $3.15 million. A round of applause to all of you. Thanks so much for all you're doing and continue to do. I have a couple of announcements that I want to share with you, and then we'll get right into our program. A couple of dates, if you'll please keep in mind to save. On Thursday, November 9th, the men's campaign event. On Thursday, November 17th, the door-to-door. On Wednesday, November 30th, the legislative reception. Just a quick plug for the legislative reception. If you haven't had an opportunity to attend, I hope you will. It's really an opportunity for our community to get some free up close and personal face time with our legislators in the General Assembly. It's important for them to know that we care and that we're paying attention to what they're doing. And then, of course, on Sunday, December 4th, is the Federation Super Sunday event. We'll have an opportunity to make some calls and hopefully raise the last little bit of money towards our campaign. I want to give a special thanks, as always, to Pick Up Plus for the delicious food. I want to thank the Federation's professional leadership, Sam Asher, Alyssa Aronovici, Diane Muncie, Sarah Rosenbaum, and Jesse Feld for their work in putting together tonight's event and this morning's event. As always, I want to thank the Lunchtime JCC for graciously hosting us this morning. And it's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker this morning. I doubt there are many folks in the room who don't know Richard November. He is notoriously, almost painfully shy. So it was real work to get him to come and join us. We're grateful and appreciative that he did join us. I'll share with you just a few things about Richard's professional and civic life, that some of which I knew, some of which I didn't, and all of which makes me a little embarrassed for the things I haven't done.
There's some things you're not going to know.
In 1965, Richard founded the Lamy Corporation and was involved in developing single-family homes for 20 years. In 1975, he established the Continental Development Corporation. He was its president. He was a general partner in the Virginia Industrial Interport Associates. He helped develop Windsor Oaks, Northern Forest, and Putnam Place in Ricochet County. And he was co-chairman of the Fidelity Group, a local real estate investment group. In the Jewish community, he has been the assistant treasurer, and chairman of the finance committee of the Jewish Community Federation, and the president of the Jewish Community Federation. I feel certain there are additional offices he's held held in that August agency entity. He is a past board member of Jewish Family Services, Beth Shalom Home, Temple Bethel, and the Jewish Community Center. He is a former president of this Weinstein Jewish Community Center, and he served as chairman of the fundraising and building committees for the construction of Camp Hilbert in Houston. He was the chairman of the building committee for the JCC, the same position, incidentally, that his father held when the center was built on Monument Avenue. He was the chairperson for the renovation of Temple Bethel Social. He was the president of the Home Builders Association of Richmond. He's a life member of the Home Builder Association of Virginia's board of directors, and he was state president of that organization from 1960 to 1987. Proving his bipartisan bona fides, Governor Chuck Robb appointed Richard to the Virginia Contractors Registration Board. Former governors Jared Miles and Doug Wilder appointed him to the Virginia Housing Study Commission. And former Virginia Governor George Allen selected Richard for membership on the Virginia Israel Commission. His record of service to our community and to the Commonwealth and to the nation and to the Jewish community is, I think, unparalleled. When we were trying to figure the best way to get Richard here and to solicit from him some of his experiences and impressions, we thought we could do it in sort of traditional speech, and Richard wasn't comfortable doing that. But one of the things that we thought would be a treat is if his daughter Shelley Goldman would join him on the stage and interview her dad. Shelley, in very many ways, is running the family business. Her record and many contributions to Jewish communal life equally distinguished. She's a Richmond native. She grew up here in Richmond. She's an alum of Oakland South Franklin High School and the University of Virginia, a charming school in Charlottesville. I'm told they've started playing sports there. I don't know all the
national top champions in most sports. Spring.
She has a master's degree from VCU in teaching. She has taught high school math in Rutherford County. She is the proud mother of Jared and Pete and Evie, and Lynn is, of course, very fortunate to be her husband. She is dedicated to family and volunteerism, mostly in schools, and of particular importance to me and close to my heart. She is the current president of this Weinstein JCC. There may be other Jewish communal agencies around the country that can boast 3 generations of leadership, but I don't know how many of them, and we are fortunate to have both Shelley and Richard here today. With that, I give you both of them. Welcome. Please join me in welcoming them.
Thank you, Colin and Sam, for having us, and including me in the program, because I know Dad cannot hold his own up here by himself. I just have one question for y'all first, and that is, do you really get up, dressed, and out by 7 a.m. every morning? Because that was kind of hard, especially when the school's calling, telling you the bus is going to be late. But we've got it all figured out. I also want to thank you on not scheduling this during the Dodger game on Friday, because Dad would not have been here. It's sweet of y'all really to come and hear Dad's story. He's full of history, and after talking to him over the last couple days, he's very impressed with his memories and his mind. He's got it all up there. We may be here for 3 or 4 hours, but I'll try to cut him off. Having said that, let's go ahead and get started.
Absolutely.
Since we're in the company of so many distinguished businessmen and women, Dad, could you give us a brief summary on how you got started in business?
Well, number one, I don't talk briefly about any of them. Number two, after hearing all the credits Colin just said, I think I should probably charge more than I have for today's engagement. And thirdly, I'm definitely, I may not be very interesting, but I can assure you I'm much better prepared than Donald Trump in his interview. That I promise. Business, we're going to kind of break this down with Shelley and myself, but it's kind of in two parts, maybe three. Talking about some of my business background and what I went through, pretty much retired now. And then we're going to get into a very brief summary of Jewish history, going back to the 1700s. But that will go very quickly when Jews first started coming here. And then the most important theme from my point of view this morning is really, which they asked me to speak on, was the what it was like being brought up in Richmond in the 50s as a Jewish teenager, and some of the experiences that I went through, and some of the differences that have occurred between the 50s and the kids that are growing up today, such as my grandchildren. So that's kind of going to be the format. I started out with my dad in 1960. He had started the building business in 1938 and was one of 2 or 3 builders in Richmond who was allowed to build during the Second World War. I won't get into all of the details of why he and a couple others, but they took a lot of persistence and paperwork in order to do that. Obviously, building materials in those days were being diverted into the war effort. So, but nevertheless, he continued and started out, didn't know anything about it, but with the urging of my mother, who could definitely urge, he was very successful up until when I joined him in 1960. Then things started going downhill. But we built homes mostly in the Barnet area, 1960 to 80, 20 years. Not a volume build, about 15 to 20 a year, but high-priced homes for those days in the 3,000 square foot range. And there have been so many changes that I really like to be, I don't like a lot of generalities. I love to give examples of things that really occurred to show here as we go through it. So some of the major changes that went on. We then went on after 80. I pretty much stopped building, and we always developed the subdivisions where we built homes. But from 80 on, we started developing subdivisions and just sold the lots off to builders. And there have been many, many changes that have occurred since those days in the 80s and 90s compared to today. The major ones that I see from my point of view is, number one, certainly the environmental impact. I think the key to that, and I want to quickly state, even though I'm not in the business any longer, as I said, pretty much retired, or the environmental impacts that the Chesapeake Bay Act, which was enacted under Governor Miles, who I admired tremendously, in 1989. And that was really I don't want to say the beginning, but it was really the impetus for some of the laws and regulations that have come into play, particularly in the protection of wetlands. For those that are not familiar with wetlands, very quickly, it's a very, very important part of our system, ecosystem, and it provides habitat for certain types of birds, and it's really a water filtering system in lay terms. And Governor Miles was instrumental. In fact, I think Bertie Henderson's here. I'm sure whether you were with Jerry back then or not, and you were. So he certainly knows what I'm talking about. But it had a tremendous impact, and it did restrict areas that you could build. The point I want to make, just to give you an example, as I said, I like to do that. My dad and I, later on in the 70s, and actually my cousin Neil was involved at that time, we did do a lot of commercial development, but we did do a large commercial development on Williamsburg Road, industrial development for warehousing and office space and so on. It was a 225-acre parcel, probably had to accumulate 8 to 10 different property owners to put it together, which we did. And we developed the 225 acres. If we had the Chesapeake Bay Act in effect, at the time we developed it, even though it didn't come in, as I just said, till '89, about 40% of that land would not have been able to be developed. So that just gives you an idea of the magnitude that it had. But it was a good thing, regardless, developers are always going to cry out if they have to lose some density. Is very hard on with that. Second big impact, huge, and it's just been in the news last week, cash profits. Cash profits, in my view, and I try to be objective in everything that I look at, cash profits, I think, were always unfair. They were called a fee, not a tax. That's a lot of baloney. It's nothing. I don't know the difference between a fee and a tax. Maybe someone here can tell me. The bottom line is, up until last week, first of all, Henrico County never had cash profits. The reason Henrico never had cash profits, nor did the city of Richmond, but the next part applies more to Henrico County, is because their tax base was so diversified. It wasn't nearly percentage-wise. They had a much better breakdown between commercial real estate taxes and residential. And it's assumed, and I think it's probably correct, residential development does cost the counties, the city, money because of the schools and all the services you have to provide. And the profits were put in place probably with good intentions to help pay for schools, parks, recreational, library, and street improvements. But anyway, it reached a point where Chesterfield County, and up until recently, Hanover were right at just under $20,000 a house for cash profit. Simply stated, you want to go build a home, you got to walk in, you put down $20,000 before you put a shovel in the ground. And when you break that down and think about it, how it impacts the homeowner, ultimately the builder, or the developers would add $20,000. Actually, the builder is the one who pays for it, but add $20,000 to the cost of the home. And then the poor homeowner, let's say, gets an average of a 20% loan. So that means he's putting down 20%, getting an 80% loan. That means about $16,000 or 80% of $20,000 is going to be built into the mortgage, which is then going to add additional interest. So I never felt it was a fair system. Apparently, the thinking eventually came around. The Chesterfield County last week reduced their $20,000 in just about in half. Hanover's reduced it just about 60%, from about 20 down to about 6,500, and it could even be lower. As I said, Hanover never had it, and the city of Richmond never had it. And up in the Northern Virginia areas, believe it or not, cash profit is close to $50,000 a home. So that's part of the reason. Enough about the cash profits. Another major change that I've seen, somewhat from a distance because of my lack of activity in the last few years, but there's such a much greater emphasis put on the amenities of subdivisions now compared to my day. My day, when we were developing, we put in the roads and water, so all the basic items that you need for a subdivision, but I never had to be concerned about underground utilities. Actually, I did. That's not true. We did put in underground, but sidewalks, fitness centers, the elaborate entrances we have now, the landscaping, the model homes have become, we had model homes, but not anything compared to the amenities and the thought that goes into it now. And also in today's society, you see some of the larger builders. In my day, it was a lot of family type builders. You want to call them mom and pop, much like my dad, myself, and some of the names I know, some of the old timers in here. I don't think any of them as old as I am, but it was a family type thing. It went from generation to generation. Now you have a lot of the national builders around. I'm not saying that's not good, but we have a common like H.H. Hunt, Stylecraft, and the Bryans, who used to have Rob, but they're no longer around. So that is another major change that has occurred in the building industry. the houses, the appointments that they have for the houses there, and it's certainly different, you know, the granite type of countertops and stainless steel and stone columns. Architecturally is a tremendous upgrade from things that we used to do, which frankly, back in the 60s and 70s, it was pretty simple. You built a home, and it was a colonial style, typical two-story or a tri-metal. We used to build tri-metals back then. Certainly, in trying to wrap this part of it up, you know, the effects of the recession. Of course, it caused many bankruptcies. A lot of friends of mine went down. Certainly affected, I'm not here to complain, I'm just making a statement. I mean, I saw it myself. I have a couple friends that are sitting in this room that I was involved with in the development. Just to give you an idea on Ponce Track, we're not going to get into any particular names. It was a 52-lot subdivision, townhouses. We had to build them and was buying the lots. Purchased the first 20 lots out of a 52-lot subdivision for $134,000. The recession hit, and over the next several years, and it was a lot of sleepless nights for my friends, Bob Solstitz and Barry Crawford, who I'm going to get to in a minute. We sold the next 32 lots for $62,000, and we're lucky to do. So that gives you an idea of the impact that what are you laughing at, Bob? I mean, you had to put the money up. He's the only one. He was the only one we kept in the group because he had the money. So, but it gives you an idea of the impact that the recession had on the builders. And to say that things are better now, they are better. To say that things have really rebounded is not true. Just want to give you a couple statistics, and we'll move on from the National Home Builders Association. In 2003, in the state of Virginia, there were 40,000 starts. In 2009, when the recession was really beginning to affect us, there were 11,000 starts in the state of Virginia. This year, there'll be somewhere projected year-end around 25,000. And 2016, this year, is projected nationwide, there'll be about 800,000 starts in the country. And during the boom years, prior to 2007, there were close to 2 million. So roughly a third, more or less, a little bit less than that. But you can see the effects that the recession still has. And frankly, the 2 million was probably too many. It was kind of a frenetic, frantic type thing. Everybody was building. The credit was too easy. Some of the mortgages that were available were not strict enough, really. And people were getting mortgages who candidly were not able to pay back their obligation. And the result is a lot of reasons for the recession. Not here to go into that. But my business career, really, I would say the highlight, getting away from the building and from the development end of it, was that I had the privilege, and I truly mean this. In 1986, we started a bank known as Fidelity Federal Savings Bank, which I was fortunate enough to serve on their board. And probably the most fortunate thing is we had an outstanding president, Barry Crawford, who's in the audience tonight, or today, or this morning. What is it, about 5:45 in the morning? It was a great experience because it brought everything together that you would want in life. And it was profitable. We were able to sell out to the 1997 to BB&T. We had a wonderful professional team in addition to Barry. Just the ladies that we had, primarily our top execs, even that go back then were ladies. But Barry did a great job, and it was a family. And I think the key to our success kind of put on two things. Number one, we had a great board, was one reason in addition to our professionals. And more importantly, the board knew their place. We didn't try to run the bank. We were not bankers. In fact, most of us had a really tough time balancing our checkbook. And so we were not great experienced bankers, but we knew our role, we knew our oversight, and we ended up providing for our stockholders, and we made a very, very excellent sale in the when BB&T bought us. So that is certainly one of the highlights of my career. That's kind of a business, a summary of where I come from. And before we move on, any questions, any comments? And I mean, let's just make this informal. Anybody have any? Because I know we got
This is not on my program yet.
Yeah, I know. Did we have any?
I have a script here.
Yeah, I know.
The questions are for later.
Yeah, okay, but I've never adhered to the script. No one's ever accused. Okay, so I'm gonna follow my daughter's advice and do what she tells
That's
me.
right, that's right. Thank you. We're gonna go ahead and transition to Dad's childhood. And we've been talking a lot about how growing up Jewish in the 50s was different than growing up Jewish in the 2000s. So, having said that, how unified was the Jewish community during the period of your childhood? And did you ever face any anti-Semitism? And speak a little bit about the key agencies that supported your Jewish life. Here we go.
Okay. Well, very quickly, and I'm going to get to your questions. You may have to repeat them, but by the time I get there, we'll forgotten them. But
do y'all have lunch, Sam?
what time is it, Sam? What time we got to be out of here?
Move along, Dan.
She tells me that every day. Growing up in Richmond was wonderful in the 50s. That's when I was in high school. I was in high school for a long time. Actually, I went into the 50s, 60s, and 70s in high school. I'm just thinking today, some of my professors in college and teachers at high school is seeing me up here supposedly teaching something, they'd absolutely turn over. That's no way. It was a wonderful experience. There were several very important influences. Obviously, the parents are number one. I think the second most important was my synagogue, and the third most important was the Jewish Community Center. And I don't want in any way want to say that other Jewish organizations or any organizations weren't important. But when you're a teenager, the center is the one that offers the programs that you would be interested in. I mean, at 14, you're really not thinking about going to the best show at home, you know. So I am now. In fact, I got an appointment there. I'm looking at an appointment at 9:30. That's not true. Well, it's 9:30 p.m. You might make the herb.
Does that mean I get the house?
All she wants is that she wants the house. We maybe buy the house.
Okay.
I just told you what the recession did. I'm not. Anyway, it was wonderful, and the synagogue was really the focus point in that the Jewish kids primarily went to either Albert H. Hill School down in Patterson, Virginia, and or mostly went to Albert H. Hill or West Hampton Junior High. I went to both of them. I was expelled from Hill, so they sent me to West Hampton. And the kids then went on to primarily Thomas Jefferson High School and John Marshall High School. There was only a third high school, only three back then, and Highland Springs, which was in the East End, was the third high school at that time. And I'd say 95% of the teenagers, and that's what we're talking about, here, with Thomas Jefferson. We were clannish. We really, to some degree, segregated ourselves. We used to meet every morning on the front steps. It was a ritual, and we taught, whatever it was, subject of the day may be. I would say that as far as any anti-Semitism is concerned, I personally never felt it except on one or two occasions. And but I never had any problem with it. I do know of some of my friends that did have issues on that score, but for me to say that it was a real issue then, that would be unfounded. It just didn't seem to be. I think the isolation of the Jewish kids was really provided mostly on their own. And that there were reasons for that. Number one, back then, 2 days out of the week, so basically 2 out of 4 days, because on Friday you wouldn't be going to Hebrew school, and in the afternoon you go home. But 2 days out of the week we went to Hebrew school. So we walked together all the day in public schools. We were together 2 days a week at Hebrew school. We were together on Saturday mornings at temple. And we were together on Sundays, every Sunday at Sunday school. And then in addition to that, when you became old enough, you went through confirmation classes. So we were together all the time. We had another major influence were at the time, the Jewish sororities and fraternities. There were 5 or 6 Jewish fraternities in Richmond, and there were 2 major, there were 2 Jewish sororities, Iota and Sigma. And I was in Oaks, which was one of the major fraternities. I mean, I don't want to sound boastful. We had a great athletic program in Oaks. I was voted the outstanding athlete in 1951, 52, 53. I was known as the Jewish Jim Thorpe, and
I was wondering if that was coming out.
oh yeah, I was fantastic. We did have a great team. In fact, we really did have a couple outstanding Jewish athletes. Seriously, a gentleman who became a dentist, Dr. Spiegel, and a good friend of mine, Eddie Jeff. But the fraternity is offered not just an athletic opportunity. What they offered was our exposure in particular to the Jewish Center. And we had a youth council, which was comprised of all of the members of the various fraternities, sororities, and clubs. We even had clubs like pre-fraternities, like SNAPS, and I don't know if anyone in here knows, KID, and they kind of graduated from that level, that would be 10 and 11-year-olds up when they became teenagers. So that was a wonderful experience. There, on the downside, if you will, the Jewish community back then was very splintered in that they're basically, for those who are not Jewish here today, and I know there are a few, there are basically 3 divisions. I hope the rabbis will agree with me: conservative Jews, Reform Jews, and Orthodox Jews. And we pretty much went our own way. And even though, let me quickly add that the Bethel Harbor Jews, which was the first temple, well, actually the second temple in Richmond, who primarily were from Germany and migrated here, they did a great deal to help the entire Jewish community. They were, in most cases, they were the elite, and they had been very, very successful in business, and they had what they call the Hebrew Benevolent Ladies Society, which ultimately became 1945 Jewish Family Services, as you know it today. So, but nevertheless, I think those barriers were broken down, And of all the wonderful things that this center, Jewish Community Center, has done, I'll give you a quick rundown on that. When the Jewish Community Center was originally built, it wasn't originally built, Jack Bernstein gave us an old school building over on Hollywood Avenue. I say gave, charged like $5 a year for it. In 1946. In 1948, it burned to the ground. From 48 to about 51, we were scattered around. We had a room. B'nai B'rith gave us a room. A couple of the synagogues gave us rooms. In 1951, we moved to Grove Avenue, 2100 block, a little old church that I remember going to. And it was at that point in history, with the leadership of the Richmond Jewish Community Council, which was formed in 1935, which you know today is the Federation. It was with their leadership and their motivation that primarily the conservative and the reformed Jewish leadership came together with some help from the Orthodox. But the center overall in their history, which is this being our 70th year, by the way, we're in the process of writing the history of it this year, we just hired the author. That was the beginning of really the unification of the Jewish people here in Richmond. And it was a great, great experience that my dad, my uncle, my cousin were very involved in. So anyway, we went on to this little church on 2100 Road, which I remember so well. And then we started thinking, there were 21 men that put together some seed money, started thinking about architects, developing, building a new center. It took 4 or 5 years. They had a capital fund drive, raised $600,000-$700,000. The bottom line is we ended up on Monument Avenue, and 1959 we dedicated this building. And we had 5 or 6 expansions on this building since that occurred. And we added the auditorium. Most recent to bring this down to some type of conclusion before 9:30 p.m. is that we raised $18.5 million about 12 years ago, 2004, and we added a new pool, a second pool to the facility. We added a fitness center. We did a lot of upgrading. We did $2 million worth of work in the parking lot and drainage and lighting and so on. And in the most recent capital funds drive, which was around $5.5 million for the center just a couple of years ago. And let me quickly add on the $18.5 million job. Rick Aaronstein led that. His center wouldn't have achieved that without him. He was fantastic. The most recent job, we spent a couple million renovating Camp Hilbert, which has become a very big part of our programming. Seriously, we're always on time.
Okay, so to back up on the JCC commercial here.
Okay.
Let me reel you back in. One thing that we talked about, which I found fascinating and very different than today, is the social interaction of the Jewish community and how y'all all stuck together. It was not as assimilated as today with non-Jews.
Right.
And you mentioned the different country clubs. So could you expand on that?
Didn't expand on anything. I don't know how accurate it will be. What the hell? I would say in Richmond, the anti-Semitic situation, there were really 2 areas. Number one was subdivisions. There were several, we won't go into names. There were several where the deed of restricted covenants prohibited the Jews. That no longer exists. And the other was country clubs. And at the time, so what did it do? The Jewish population ultimately ended up with 2 country clubs here in Richmond. Actually, the history on the Lakeside Country Club, which was the first one. It was actually called Lakeside Park in 1896. When it was formed in the 1930s, they ran into after the recession, they ran into financial problems. The Jefferson Club, which had been formed 20 years earlier as a golfing club, then merged, or you could call it a merger, took over the Lakeside Club, and it became Jefferson Lakeside. Interesting enough, when the Lakeside Club was built in 1896, Lewis Skinner was the one who built it as a wheelhouse club. And that's where people would bicycle out there on their bicycles. That makes sense. And they had a pool, they had a bowling alley, they made a park, a zoo. And then ultimately, the golf course was built. And so that's how the Lakeside Country Club evolved over history. And it's still in existence today. I'm not sure, I looked for the date, I couldn't find it. Somewhere in the 70s, someone in the room may be able to help me. The second club, the Lakeside Club was primarily German Jews. They were primarily members of Bethel Hall. And they were primarily very successful lawyers and business people and doctors and so on. The Oak Hill Country Club, which was built, I think, in the 70s, or 60s or 70s. And they were primarily conservative Jews that belonged there, which would be Bethel Jews, because that was the largest conservative temple in Richmond, and at the time, probably still is as far as numbers. But anyway, that was mostly Eastern European Jews belonging there. And then they built their club out on Patterson Avenue. In fact, I have fond memories of it, because that's where my wedding reception was. I've got memories of it. Most of them were very fond. And and then ultimately the two clubs merged. And on Lakeside remained as the club from a physical point of view, and that golf course. And now Oak Hill is actually part of West Street. So that was the history of the country clubs.
So is it suffice to say that the center, the synagogues, and the country clubs all were the institutions that perpetuated your Jewish identity when you were growing up, a young kid, into your married life, I guess, which is...
Well, my married life, I think, started, I think your mother and I met in the nursery. What perpetuated, number one, it's your parents always. My mother and dad were very involved in Jewish activities. So we went to temple. I think things have changed so much. Everybody is so busy now. We weren't as busy growing up as the kids are now. I mean, Shelley last night was out in Hanover. She was over the
Whole Green Road.
Whole Green Run, running cross country with Jared. She's at lacrosse, and we didn't have all of that to speak of. I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm not here to make that judgment, but certainly your parents had a huge influence. I think the temple, there's no question. The synagogues had a much greater influence on my upbringing, on my philosophy, on my feeling about life. We were there so much, and it was really a very integral part. It was the main part of our, obviously, spiritual and religious background, that's evident, but also our social. We had Christians once a month where you learn how to do the right thing, how to dance. It was activities, it was fundraisers we did for multiple sclerosis, but muscular dystrophy, his teenagers, and all of this was initiated through our synagogues and to some degree the Jewish Center and the fraternity. So I think my real identity and my devotion to my religion is comes from my parents and my family. As you know, your mother is very particular about following the Jewish traditions and making a Jewish home.
Very particular.
Very particular. Frankly, she's particular about everything. And
She's not here to defend herself. This is a little too early for her. So,
I mean,
be nice.
she's getting over a little operation, so for the last few weeks I've been making the beds so she doesn't have to strain and stuff. And the goddamn sheets on pulled the right way, I can't, excuse me. Any of this thing for me? She's got a wrinkle in it, a pillowcase, who cares? Anyway, but I mean, it really follows through, and I'll say this, I think that I think all religions end up at the same place, which is to try to make yourself a better person, to try to help your neighbors and people you don't even know. I think we may come from different paths and different highways, different directions, but I think we end up at the same stop sign. And with Judaism, it's not that I'm a learned Jew, I'm not, but I believe Judaism, and I think all religions, it's not just Judaism, but well, maybe it's Judaism, provides, I call it a plan for life. I think it's more than just knowing the Hebrew prayers, which are important, or the English, or the hot bar, and so on. It's really implementing day to day what a path to follow, a plan to follow. So that's what I would hope my children have learned, and hopefully my grandchildren.
we're still working on them.
You know, you're working on one of them anyway.
You know who, Lisa, we know who that one is.
All right, well, having said that, Dad, thank you for sharing with us. And one thing before we go to questions, Dad mentioned his lack of activity when he was referring to being retired, but I just want to make it super clear, and I'm sure everyone in this room knows that he is far from lacking activity. He is always fighting to get out, whether his back hurts or his knees replaced or whatever. He's either in the gym or working on some project. And one thing he's always told me, besides the religious influence, is that being productive makes you feel the most worth. And so, having said that, he is still being very productive today, and I am super proud of him because he's getting ready to receive the Eleanor Marshall Humanitarian Award given by Hadassah. I think there are invitations on your table. If you would like to join us, we are very proud of him on October 30th. I can't think of anyone more deserving. So that's awesome. And he's also very engrossed in the JCC's 70th anniversary celebration with a commemorative book that is being authored, and he's full of history and been in a lot of meetings. He loves to go to meetings about that. So he is far from inactive. Having said that, if anybody has any questions for him, preferably him, not me. Go ahead.
So, how did you deal with generational transitions, both in the business and in the philanthropic world? Your father was involved, you were involved, your whole family was involved. How did you guys come up with a system of transitioning that, stepping in your father's shoes or your children stepping in your shoes?
I don't know that there was.
You wouldn't let me go into business with him. I'm just telling you.
Well, as far as the business is concerned, one of the daughters is out of town, so I have two daughters. But as far as the civic activities are concerned, I think that's just by example. I don't know of a better method. I mean, Shelley and Debbie saw me, not to talk about me, but that's the question, going to meetings all the time. And now most of them seem to be in the day of the morning, back then it was mostly night meetings. And they saw my activity in various Jewish organizations and beyond. And I mean, I'm very proud of had accomplished with the Boys and Girls Club, and particularly in the Ripken Foundation, which are two organizations that really help the minority group, the inner city kids, tremendously. But to be specific, it's just by example, it's just by doing it. We've been talking about it, you know, and I think, I mean, just as an example, I don't mean to go on, but this award I'm getting in the end of the month, and the proudest thing for me is that my grandchildren, I have 3 of them, are going to be there. The proudest thing for me is that they'll have that opportunity, not to see me get them a plaque. That's beautiful, that's great. But I hope they'll learn. I hope it's a learning lesson for them. As they say in athletics, I guess, I hope it's a coachable moment, that they'll understand what their grandfather tried to do. And so the answer is just really by example.
I'm a lot younger than you, but I think I'm in the same generation as a lot of us, planning factor in their communities, especially coming from a very small town, didn't have all the advantages, which was the creation and survival of the state of Israel. And I know you've been involved in that. Can you tell us a little bit about the impact of creation and survival of the state of Israel?
Well, of course, Israel was established, at least as we know it today, the state of Israel in 1948, with the backing probably of primarily happened because of President Truman and the United States. Israel's had a tremendous impact on me. I've had the privilege, including going to Durban and Rona there. I've been there on 3 occasions. And most recently it was 2000 when I was president of the Federation. When you see, and we work very hard in this community, we work very hard in all communities throughout America, well, not all, but most communities that have a Jewish population. And we don't have a large Jewish population. We're around 10,000 or 11,000 Jews in Richmond. That's all. And we raise over $3 million a year, which about 35% I believe goes to Israel. But what they have accomplished, when you walk down the street in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and you see the accomplishments in the technology, and you see the 2 hospitals, the Hadassah, which is a ladies' organization, national, international organization, the 2 hospitals that they have helped fund. But beyond the 2 hospitals, more importantly, is the work that's being done there, particularly in stem cell research. When you see the vitality of the people that have been attacked over and over again in their history since 1948, and were attacked within a month after they were formed by 8 Arab nations, as I recall. And they had a ragtag Israeli military, who most of them couldn't even talk to each other because they all come from different countries. At the point that, Hebrew, but they didn't have the opportunity to even learn it. Somehow they survived the war. The point being, Israel's had a tremendous impact and should on all Jews throughout the world. And what our co-religionists went through in the 30s and in the 40s, being the Holocaust, we should learn how important having a home state is. So, to me, Irvin, thank you for the question. Great question. It's made a huge impact on me, on my family, and my real dream is to take my children and grandchildren down. If I can get some more.
You need the economy to bounce back.
Well, no, I need a good orthopedic doctor. Dr. Radbound's been taking care of me, and so I need a new knee. Anyway, and other questions? We're probably running over. Good times.
I think we're fine.
We're okay.
Oh, wait,
Any other-
9 o'clock?
Any other questions? I don't wanna.
You did mention Richard, your father, when you found this,
Bethel, that's,
Mr. Cohen, okay.
Uh,
Mr. Cohen was talking about the founding of Bethel
okay.
and
Two.
my grandfather?
Yeah, my dad, Herman November, Bethel was founded in 1932. Originally met at the Scottish Rite. They had a room, Scottish Rite temple, I guess. They moved to a storefront on Wall Street in 1933. And they started putting together, they did not at that time have a conservative synagogue. And my dad was very involved, and Mr. Levitt, I could go on with names. But and they eventually bought what they called the Presbyterian League building, which is where on Grove Avenue. It was basically a church. I moved in 1938, and they had a vacant lot next door to it. And they started putting plans together, and they built the sanctuary as we know Bethel today. And that was started, and then the war started. So the building, my dad was building chairman. The war started, the building ceased, we couldn't do construction because of the war. Ultimately, we moved into our new facility, new synagogue, in 1948. And that was at the peak of their history. They had over 800 families. Unfortunately, which has happened to most Jewish synagogues and frankly to most religious entities, we don't have nearly the amount of people that we used to have. We're down to 450 families. But that was the beginning of the conservative Judaism in Richmond, Virginia. Colin, we okay, bud?
I think we are coming right up on 9 o'clock, so I just want to thank you both so much for that wonderful presentation and the insight into Richard's history, into your business history. It really is an example for all of us. I hope you'll join me in thanking Richard. It's always a treat. So thank you.
If you were bored, at least don't tell me you were bored. Okay? Thank y'all. I really enjoyed it. Y'all were wonderful. Thank you, Shelley. I need you more on the list.